Hi everyone, we're back already. Just want to talk to you a little bit about today about Jugalbandi, the why, the what, and the how. Jugalbandi started 6 months ago, 6, 7 months ago in December of last year, and at that time it was a WhatsApp chatbot. Today it's a software stack. Today it's an architecture, it's an infrastructure. And we've come a long way, and this is, yes, just a recap of the journey and what's the way forward. So, the why is encapsulated in a little bit of this timeline that we've created, starting from 2021, May of 21 to be specific. And at that time, I think the biggest, our focus area was legal data. And what can we really do if we are able to open up legal data? Can we create an ecosystem of innovation? Can we create an ecosystem of entrepreneurs? We realized that the highest leverageable thing you could do if you had access to high quality data was create AI applications. That is when OpenAI was started. We had a bunch of organizations who've come together, ThoughtWorks, Agami, National Law School Bangalore, RNP, XStep, so many others. And I just quickly encapsulate how we were focusing on classic ML models. We were focusing on building the foundational blocks which were entirely open sourced for law and justice in India. So we said, can we create some blocks that would allow a law student to look at a judgment and understand it intuitively in 2 minutes, even if it's a 200-page judgment. So we started with that imagination, and we created NER models which allowed you to go into the granular detail of what each word in a judgment represents, what role does it play, then going into what role a sentence can play, and then what's the summary of the facts, what's the summary of the arguments, so on and so forth. These models today are at 90% accuracy. These are all entirely open source, so anybody can access them. The code base is entirely available on GitHub. As we were doing that, we were trying to engage with more lawyers, innovators, legal tech entrepreneurs, and that's when ChatGPT came. And we wanted to see what is the coolest thing we could do with having ChatGPT, having had built these models. We had access to some legal data. We had access to Bhashini, the amazing thing that was happening under the Ministry of Electronics initiative, where IIT Bombay and IIT Madras were building some amazing language models for all 22 officially recognized Indian languages. At that time, Saurabh, many people in XStep, Vivek, folks who were working with the Bhashini model at that time, Himanshu, Agami Summit was coming at that time, and we were discussing what is the most impressive thing we could do, and we thought, what if we could bring ChatGPT to our own device, right? What if we could bring it to WhatsApp? What if we could bring it in Malayalam? What if we could bring it for information which is so specific and nuanced that ChatGPT might not know about it today, but we want access to that information? And what if we could do it in voice? So what that resulted in was essentially Jugalbandi, which we have demonstrated at various places, but it basically allows you to, and most of you might already know this, but just as a context setting, it allows you to send a message on WhatsApp in voice in any Indian language and ask a question about the data that you have fed into it, about data such as government welfare programs, data such as any of the laws that you choose to feed into it. It could be data around your own personal notes. For instance, you've been a working professional for 10 years, you have 10 years worth of notes. Can you query on top of them? What was I feeling on 30th January 2005? You could find that from your notes. When we started doing that, we wanted to focus on how can we bring this to people without them having to approach us. I think that was the biggest imagination for us. What would that look like? Can we create it, make it so easy that in half an hour, you have your own bot based on your own data? And can we go to that link? Oh, it's not. Let me try and disconnect. The screen is here, but it's not. I'll try. If it doesn't work, we'll connect to yours.
I'm just connecting.
Connect to yours. Okay, it worked. Yeah, worked. So some of the demonstrations that we were trying at that time was, can we get it to work on Indian laws? And we were working with the Karnataka High Court, and in fact we showed the WhatsApp chatbot to a couple of judges, and immediately they said, can you build it for laws? And it was so interesting to hear that we hadn't even thought about it at that time. At that time it was just based on 200 government welfare programs. And then saying, can you ask a question on top of a document? It can be any document, any number of documents. And then also see the answer that's coming on the left side. You can see where in the document it has gotten it from. So if you scroll down, you'll see exactly, so it has taken all the yellow highlighted parts that you see. It has read all of that to give us the answer, who can get a promotion in Karnataka under the Karnataka State Civil Services Act. And being able to do this meant that the trust that was in the system could be maintained. You could maintain the fact that this answer has not come up from air, right? It hasn't been generated using AI, which is a black box. You can see exactly what the AI has read to be able to give me this answer. That extractive or abstractive nature of this tool is really the part today. And this is based on retrieval augmented generation, the RAG system. If you can show the architecture, which is on the GitHub. That architecture essentially, thank you. So this is basically what it's based on, right? You send a voice input, you ask a question. I'm a farmer, I want to buy a tractor. Can the government support me? This question in voice format goes to WhatsApp, which then sends it to Bhashni, which does automatic speech recognition. It identifies that I'm speaking in Malayalam, for instance. It converts that into text, and then it converts that text into English, and then it sends it back to OpenAI. And while it's doing that, there is a level of redaction that's happening to ensure that no private and personally identifiable information is being leaked or released. And that information could look like my address, my place of work, my age, my date of birth, so on and so forth. As soon as it sends it to OpenAI, it also simultaneously hits our knowledge base. We've been able to remove the parametric knowledge of ChatGPT, which is basically the entire internet, and replace that with our own data. And that data can look today like 1,000 PDFs or 20,000 Word documents. All of that to say that once it interacts with the knowledge base, it's able to find out where the answer is located and send it back again in English text. But it hits Bhashini, and at that time, that text gets converted into audio, into Malayalam, and then it comes on WhatsApp. And this is happening in a matter of 5 seconds, maximum 10 seconds. And basically what this system allows you to imagine is WhatsApp is just one interface. It could be Telegram, it could be a website, it could be a web app, it could be a phone call. What if all of this could happen if I just dial a number, right? So this was really the imagination, and I think what is really cool today is that people have actually started building out their own Jugalbandi based deployments, right? Jugalbandi based applications. I don't know if Rushil is here. Hi. But Bandhu has basically created an entire bot which is using some of the architecture, but entirely their own database. And we'll just sort of have a look at that.
So, with retrieval augmented generation systems, I want to basically say that for a bunch of applications that we think about using large language model, like there are a couple of now well-established patterns of implementation that we know, right? And retrieval augmented generation is one of the simplest ones in the conception, which both powers certain chatbots as well as different kind of use cases, right? You can think of it as a one block, and then you can think of it as a repeating block. And then the moment you change prompts, you can retrieve different pieces of information, stitch it up together, send it to OpenAI, and then get the responses, right? So it really allows you to think in terms of much bigger application, but from a individual information chunk levels. The other thing that I wanted to basically say is that a lot of these systems basically take a document, split it into equal chunks, take the text, convert it into vector representations, And that's how, whenever there is a query, we try to find out what are the chunks of information that is most relevant, and then we try to pick it up, right? There are other implements. So one of the first bots that we built, which is like government scheme bots, right? We realized that and that time GPT-4 was not even a reality, right? Like it was 3.5, and we started experimenting with agents during that time. And one thing that we realized is that the action following ability of 3.5 is like really terrible. It has significantly improved in GPT-4. So the stuff that Samir was showing, right, like with respect to agents, if you try to do it with like GPT 3.5, it would probably like be like really terrible. And that's where we actually Prathamesh implemented something called a finite state machine, right? Where what we have done is like we have bounded it a little too much. So instead of getting GPT 3.5 to run very freely, what we have done is like we are calling it as like a smaller part of a more like structured, tightly bound program. And that was a learning, right? Like with respect to some of these technologies which are very stochastic in nature, some of these patterns might also appear, right? Like so. Just a note of advice, like in case you're building something which is not very sophisticated like agents, do not discard techniques like finite state machines, because what happens is that for a lot of use cases you need more reliability than creativity, where large language models could take away like certain chunks of like human effort, and you want to be sure of that you're using it. You're using best tool for the task in some sense, right? And this is a learning that we have all gone through, right? Like with respect to like how do you build agents, or like how do you use a finite state machine and things like that. So just one note that I wanted to add, that while large language models are cool technology, computer science is not dead, right? And a bunch of those things are still relevant and usable. But yeah, sorry.
When and where they want to work. They can also record a short TikTok-style skill video, which supplies our video processing AI algorithms. We use this to specialize work teams to employers who can review the workers' skill videos and ratings. Workers can see geolocated jobs and bundled housing options, with a breakdown of rent, utility, and understand exactly how they can send back home. Employers can also get work orders that browse and bid for. Our housing platform enabling quick Karn effect, enabling London workers and families to own their accounts. London's mobile app trains the wives of seasoned migrants to identify landlords within their own communities and list housing vacancies. They can list any type or part of a property and upload geolocated photos and video tours that hundreds of workers can view virtually. For each listing, they can add amenities, guest preferences, and can also choose to conduct transactions offline. Be the ideal room for Roger, a recent migrant to the city who just got off the train from his village. He has no idea this room exists or how much it cost. He's disoriented. He's spending a lot of time navigating the unknown. Should he choose a house near a formal settlement? He's not sure. Maybe group living. Maybe even a formal apartment. There are so many choices, and doesn't have much time to decide. Here comes Bandipu Housing to the rescue. New migrants seeking housing can browse property and see details like amenities, connected details, and those sorted every time have credit to unlock a vehicle. Hundreds can birth hundreds of properties, but it's a faster way to decide. Also, after paying rent for years, upgrade to own and own. Roger can contact Bandhu AI co-pilot, Bandhu WhatsApp bot. Bandhu bot helps Roger achieve three key needs in his path to home ownership: finding housing, making digital rent and deposit payments easily, and finally becoming eligible for home ownership loans, ultimately helping Roger secure his residency. Let's look at each of these detail. Bandhu understands the user in their own language. As the response in database, and provides a curated list of housing options. Bandhu enables seamless onboarding through digital payments and rental agreements. Once Roger has chosen a property, he scans the landlord's unique code to create a secure, standardized, and concise rental agreement. He reviews his personalized rent agreement and payments to complete it. initial rental payment. Bundy will secure his deposit and distribute his regular rent payment digitally to the landlord. Now Roger is all ready to check in. It receives regular reminders to pay digitally. With this transaction data, Bundy can determine the terms which you can get for rental deposits and home ownership loans. So the next time pay a large amount to secure his housing tenure, his transaction history or supplies or can get instant rental deposit loan at affordable rates. He can and choose a repayment schedule. Finally, he supplies KYC documents for validation by the bank or NBFC. With their digital on-to payment, his likelihood of being eligible for a loan increases. Loans to person and digitally and access home improvement. And then use loans to their house to purchase an home property. We are moving migrants up from securing stable shelter to eventually own their own homes in the city. Others have accelerated life's journey to find stability and realizing their aspirations. Here, London believes in life. Migration should not be our ill-informed choice for India's next billion digitized brokers.
So that was just an example of how you can use Jugalbandi, the architecture, to create an application for your own use case. Talking about that, I think we just go a little bit deeper into how you can actually do that. What is the first step of experimentation you need to do to understand how to input your own data, be able to query on top of it, see the kind of results you're getting, iterate on top of that, and then actually resulting in a bot. Saurabh, over to you.
Yeah, so we built this. So one, we built this API for a very simple reason that it takes a lot of time for development organizations to go from an idea to experimentation, and we just like wanted to accelerate that runway. Largely because these technologies will keep on improving, but like just getting a first-hand experience of building something like this and being able to apply your own contextual knowledge into like a product, like very powerful for social impact, right? So we built these APIs, we hosted it on our own server for one very simple reason, that it should not take more than 30 minutes for a not-for-profit who is fundamentally trying to look at, almost demolishing the barrier to information, where we find like two major things. One, not being able to comprehend. So comprehension becomes a problem whenever you give a complex documents. As a society, our response to like language barrier has been like, written text in vernacular, and a lot of people find that also very, very difficult. So if you are able to do that in speech, then it becomes even more powerful, because now not just that this person is able to sort of ask questions and get it into their own language, they can get empathetical response as well as contextual response, because now we have power of large language models. So Jugalbandi is also a special story for me, because it somehow shows that how like right intentions accidentally come together to do combinatorial innovation, and that's why we just wanted to shorten the runway for any organization who wants to experiment with it. We have not built it so that you can scale your systems completely on this. We in fact like encourage people to not completely build it on this, but prototype it and experiment and refine it enough so that you can have your own deployment elsewhere, right? One of the first things that you have to do, so for example, let's take an example of something that we were building with BTG Legal yesterday, right? So BTG Legal is an organization who is wanting to reduce the barrier to information for a lot of women who are wanting to know about their rights in workplaces, right? So there are discriminations, XYZ, and fundamentally it's very difficult to get any legal opinion in some sense, right? But what happens if we are able to sort of provide it with the knowledge base, and this knowledge base contains all of that information that is required to answer some of the basic queries, right? What am I eligible for? What are my rights in a particular workplace? This is happening to me. Can I do something about it, right? So, and the cool part about here is that fundamentally whenever you build these chatbots in past, you would do a frequently asked questions sort of a format, right? And that gave everyone so robotic response that there is actually a term for all the dead bots deployed on WhatsApp which are not active. So people call them zombie bots. because they exist, they are dead, and people are still like, having it there, right? But the moment you solve for contextual responses, you're solving for engagement. So people are basically able to not, both get a response, empathetical, and now they feel heard. Just one anecdotal example, right? Like, so we were doing the field testing of some of these bots in Bangalore and Haryana as well. And we were doing this with domestic workers, right? One, she did not expect it to work, but it did. And when she did it, and I just happened to ask, like, because I was also trying to get some PR material out of it, I happened to ask her, right, like, what is different, right? Like, why is this experience like so different? And she basically said that in past, whenever I had to, and so people look for government schemes, right? Like it's a really huge issue, right? And one of the biggest categories that we know with respect to like scheme search is actually like girl child, like scholarships. A lot of people are looking for this. So this domestic worker basically says that in past, whenever I had to look for a scheme, I had to depend on someone else to tell me what is written there. It might be my spouse, it might be my son, it might be someone else, but I was always dependent. The fact that I have this phone and I can ask the question and get it without any human dependency makes me feel complete, right? Like makes me feel that I am in control, right? So the way people deal with technology actually varies a lot. So how citizens engage with it, how lawyers engage with it, how judges engage with it could be completely different, and that's why we believe that a lot of contextualization and personalization needs to happen before you even make it into like a full-fledged product. But again, coming back to the original idea that we wanted to shorten the runway for someone to get from zero to experimentation. The first step in this is like we have this hosted, so you go to source document endpoint. There what you do is like you give description of what is the knowledge base you have, right? Like so you can say something like women's rights. Then you can go to the file section and you can click on choose file, which will open up like a pop-up on your screen where you can upload the files. It's okay if it's not working. The URL is very simple. It's api.jugalbandi.ai/docs. This Swagger UI will open. But you will be able to upload a zip file, a Word document, PDFs and things like that, right? What it basically means is that you can go arbitrary length number of documents, right? And the mechanism is pretty simple, pretty straightforward, that we take all the documents, do equal chunking, convert it into vector, and whenever there is a new query that comes, we try to find out all the relevant information, either map reduce it or like, put it into a prompt, send it to OpenAI, generate a response. So when Smita was saying that we do not rely on the parametric knowledge of like these large language models, what she really means is that we already provide them the context or the knowledge needed to answer a particular question, right? So it's not it's not really relying on all the training data that it had. It is basically using its reasoning capability on a query and the context, right? So once you have done this, what you will get is a unique ID for your document set, and once you pass that unique ID into your document set, you can ask questions. This is the Civil Services Act. This UUID basically relates to that. What is the definition of civil servants? Okay. So all the acts basically have this one section where they define what are the different definitions, right? Once you execute it, it will basically like go back to the vectors that I was talking about, fetch out relevant information, pair it with the query, send it to OpenAI, get the response, and then you display it. The cool thing that I find cool, right? Like I don't know about you all, right? Like that when it is deployed as endpoints, now suddenly you can integrate it with a lot more applications. And that's how we were able to sort of deploy it on WhatsApp like really fast, right? Because for us it was just calling an endpoint, which has become like almost a standard for different systems to connect. So here we asked what is this document about, and it is basically telling me that this document is about Karnataka Agriculture Pest and Disease Act of 1968, which is an act, blah blah, and things like that, right? If I asked it like more like sad question, I'm really sad that my plants are dying. Is there any provision to kill the weed in my area? It will basically try to find out all the relevant information in the document, try to generate a response and things like that, right? So once you have this endpoint, what we also provide is a Telegram accelerator bot, and the only two parameters that you need to change there is one, this unique ID. Second, a bot token that you can get from Botfather from Telegram. So just like how you buy a domain name from GoDaddy, you can get a Telegram bot name from Botfather. With these two things, you can get a Telegram bot up and running in as low as like 30 minutes, right? Which is something that we did yesterday. Now, by no means I'm saying that these systems are perfect and you take it and then you're going to be, like raking money, right? You would not be. The fundamental thing to take away here is that it is going to be so ubiquitous that people will have access to this, and more so reason for us to sort of build a standard way to sort of like build these systems, or at least like have these interfaces, so that any new entrepreneur who is basically wanting to use this technology into their product stack, it is not a 3-month R&D process for them, right? So we are able to certainly give entrepreneurs a head start in terms of being able to serve the Indian clientele or even globally, right? So in this particular case, we use a lot of Bhashani, and that's why 22 Indian languages, but nothing is stopping you from accessing like say Portuguese or Spanish or like any other languages, right? And it's the same principle. So very, very scalable, very, very expandable sort of like a implementation pattern. Using this, we were able to build BTG Legal's, this bot about like women's work rights and things like that yesterday, and then they tested it out. And just to show you what works and what doesn't, I'm actually going to invite like Prashant to share, what are the things that we noticed, because they have been testing it out yesterday. Prashant, I would like you to cover what was the knowledge base, what did not work before what worked, because I think everyone is like expecting it to be working. Yeah. Do you want to come here?
Thanks, Saurabh. I'm completely lost because none of the terms that I'm going to use are probably making sense to you. Sorry, thanks. Right. So, you guys are going to laugh at me because all the terms that you guys are using for the last 2 days are going over my head. So, I'm going to make it like really, really basic so that I don't say anything that is totally wrong. So, what we thought of about 12 months ago was this FAQ thing that you talked about, right? Putting everything together in a FAQ format and then having an intelligent system run through it and then get the answers out. But we were talking to Saurabh and Aman last week, and we said, what do you guys want from us for this residency? And Saurabh's answer was, get the acts and a lot of fun, right? And I was like, okay, fine, let's see where this goes. I get the acts, but I'll see if I have fun. And we actually just got a set of PDF documents. That's it, like trusted sources from the government websites, which we went through. We spent some time making sure that they were updated. They were the updated versions, and we collated everything into just PDF documents. And I don't even know what format we got it in. It turned out to be PDF. And then we came here yesterday, and I was still very skeptical, right? I was thinking, no, this can't be it. This is not what we want to get here. So we came here yesterday, and I got in say about 1:30 or 2 o'clock, and Saurabh said, okay, let's do this. And we sat down at 2 o'clock, and by 4 o'clock or 4:30, I think the system was spitting out answers, and I had loads of fun. Like, I'm still having fun. I'm still amazed with what we were able to see. And I went from like 0 to about 100 in my book, but Saurabh was saying that's only 0 to 10, right? There's still a 90 left. So what the Jugalbandi stack was able to do was it, like the term that you used, it extracted the chunks and then it put out the answers in very simple summarized form. So one of the questions that Shimon and I asked was, let's start with a basic question, right? I mean, I am expecting a baby, and what are my rights? And the women's rights in the workplace, the knowledge base was about 42 acts, Shimon? Was it like 42 odd legislations? And it had Factories Act, it had POSH Act, it had Payment of Wages Act, it had Equal Remuneration Act. So it wasn't like specifically just one, it was the entire world of what women's rights in the workplace is, right? And so we asked this question, and obviously, lo and behold, the AI spit out the answer, right? Then we got a little more esoteric with it, and one of the questions we asked was, I feel depressed in the workplace. What can I do about it, right? And it actually tried to reason and the context that you're talking about. It took the context and it said, you know, your employer is supposed to give you a safe and healthy working environment. But with the provided texts, I cannot give you the right answer. You may want to consult a psychologist or a psychiatrist and a lawyer to understand your rights. And that just blew our minds, right? That was something that I never expected the AI to kind of generate as an answer, given the context, because there's no law about it, there's no regulation about it, but it was still trying to kind of convince you that it is kind of giving you that answer that you want to hear, but it was bound by those boundaries or those guardrails that we had built, which didn't allow it to kind of go beyond a certain stage. So there are many questions like that. Siobhan has a list of those questions that we asked, and those answers are really cool. Maybe, you know, when we have time, if you have time, yeah.
Take a couple of instances.
Okay, great. But just to summarize, we brought that just those acts, but we've been having fun and loads of fun. So thank you very much.
So yeah, just like Prashant said, we've been having a lot of fun with it, but just a couple of instances where we use the lowest common denominator by just obviously feeding in their acts and nothing else, like not training it, not giving it any instructions. And one of the things I think we found really impressive is that without actually using the word sexual harassment, like what could we get out of it? And we had like a number of permutations, combinations, sort of saying, my boss is making me stay late at work, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And one place it was like, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, or someone is taking advantage of me. And we didn't think that this would translate into, maybe giving an answer in relation to sexual harassment. And I think what we were impressed by was its ability to reason by saying that, so it first understood those contexts, it took it in the context of harassment, and defined harassment, said that if it comes under that, then these are your rights. However, if it doesn't, then you should check the local policies. So, we thought that was really amazing. The other thing is that because we fed it both central and state acts, at times it took up very specific wording from the Uttar Pradesh Act or something. So again, like without further context and training, I think there are limitations because it will just pick up what it thinks relevant without applying it or giving conditions. And I think there's so many more observations, but I'll just end with one. Which is, I think we asked very simple, basic questions which we thought this is, it would definitely get. Where we were like, what are my rights if I make a wrong or malicious complaint? Asked in a very simple way. And what is the relevant provision? Can you tell me what that is? So it cited the provision really simply and in very clear language, but it wasn't able to copy paste the provision and give us the exact wording. And I think Saurabh and Smita can explain why, but I did think that was unusual. Like it can do such complex reasoning, but maybe not a copy paste. But yeah, other than that, we totally blew away. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think, so one, Siobhan and Prashant are gonna be around. Please catch them and ask them about the instances where it failed. These are great examples. And with that, I'm just gonna say like two things. One, the retrieval system, we believe that it's still at a nascent stage. I think we need very different kind of retrievers, right? Like we may even need intermediate representation of certain documents from which we want to. Equally distributing like chunks and just vectorizing it may not be a very good way for handling like legal documents and that knowledge. Which also, there are other implementations of it where people don't really feed it law. They actually write an entire document full with all sort of knowledge that is needed for a particular area. And that seems to be working really, really well, right? Like, so I Pro Bono team along with another colleague of ours basically built a domestic violence bot. There was a lot of iteration just on the quality of knowledge base, right? So one, the quality of response is directly proportional to your quality of knowledge base. So even if you have these systems available, a lot is still dependent on you with respect to what is the knowledge base you want to provide, and then basis that the information will be given. Which brings me to the last thing, which is about like Jugalbandi. There are a few things that I want that we just wanted to share with respect to use policy. This is more for setting experimentations. We love entrepreneurs. Please come use it for experimentation, right? The first thing is, if you want to deploy Jugalbandi, Jugalbandi is a software stack. It's a very thin layer of software where we have like enabled coordination with a lot of different APIs in a sophisticated manner available. Now you can take this software, you can run it on your own server. If you are going to be using APIs, you would be using our servers, right? So for experimentation, because we have a clear incentive to basically push all the entrepreneurs to be doing like magical stuff. We do enable them to use these APIs, but if you are going to be scaling, please go and procure your own OpenAI key or host an open source model and use those endpoints. Now you have Llama 2 available, which seems to be working really, really well, so you could do that. The second thing is like the code base is completely free and you can deploy it. It's under MIT license, so there is no restrictions. The restrictions are very, very, very few with respect to you using it either commercially or non-commercially. So please go ahead and make use of it. Our APIs are only for experimental purposes. And what that means is that if you were going to be deploying a bot like this, you can use this to iterate over the knowledge base, ensure that the quality of responses are good. But we also rate limit the responses or how many times you can ping our server, which basically is going to make your life very, very difficult if you're going to be scaling it using our servers. So there's a direct interest for you to take the code base, put it onto your own server. There are already a couple of implementations of Jugalbandi software which has been deployed on individual servers, right? We purge the data very regularly. So please, one, keep a backup. Okay, so that you are not completely relying on what you have uploaded there. But the good thing is if you have uploaded it there, it's already on your hard disk. But ensure that you are not relying on the database that we have. We purge it both for the reasons that we don't want to store information which might have legal implications. Also, sometimes people just upload like a lot of sensitive information into these documents. So we purge it very regularly just to keep our systems very, very clean. There is a Docker image available which basically ensures that you don't have to do a lot of hard work. A lot of this automation of scripts, running the software, it's already done for you. So if you go to the GitHub page for the Jugalbandi, you will see the instructions there, you can run it, right? The implementation right now is very Google Cloud specific. We are trying to ensure that it is much more generic so that you can use AWS, Microsoft Azure, or any of those things, right? And the moment you take our software stack, run it on your own server, there is no dependency on us. So a lot of people basically ask us that, like if I take your software, if I put it onto it, what do I need to come back to you for, right? And the answer is probably nothing. Unless you have a change request or unless you have a feature request, and where the limitation as well as like opportunity comes in. There might be certain customizations required from your own end, and that's why we highly recommend having some tech capacity within. It has become much more easier to do technical work, and that's why if you have some capacity within, it becomes very easy for us to embed with your team and guide your team. We love sharing stuff that we are doing, but we might not be in a position to request, to service a lot of like customization requests. We do, however, continue to talk to a lot of people to ensure that if we see common patterns in usage, we are able to sort of like take it into our production pipeline, build a feature, push it into code, so that you don't have to do that development and it's already available. But if you have like very specific requirements, for example, at a Telegram bot level, our engineers don't do Telegram bots, right? Like, and that's why implementing certain features or certain flows might be very, very difficult. So just to summarize, use your own large language models or API keys so that you do not have any dependency and legal liability for putting data on our servers. It's completely free, very few limitations because it's under MIT license. Bunch of stuff is already automated for you, so if you get like a technical team, it should be very easy for them to deploy it on your own server. And the last thing, I apologize, but we can't service a lot of requests, but we do continue to talk to everyone so that if we are able to identify certain patterns, we implement it and push it onto the code base so that everyone has access to those building patterns. And just to give you an example of what it could be, so we have been working with a lot of organizations like Gramvani, even Hagdarshak, right? Like, and a lot of organizations basically say this one thing, that what works inside a government department is not something that the AI knows, right? Like that is what my volunteers really know. But if there is a way for my volunteers to capture that tacit knowledge, put it onto the database, now suddenly a lot of people know what works inside a government office, right? And that's how they will be able to access government schemes, right? But the ability to do this bottom-up knowledge architecture is something that we see as a common pattern, which we might implement, might not implement. But these are the common architectural patterns that we see, and then we make it available into Jugalbandi software stack. With that, I'll pause. But Smita, do you want to add anything? Okay, so I think this was Jugalbandi for you in case anyone wants to use it, like we are all around. Otherwise, it's on the Jugalbandi page. If you go on how to, there is a video tutorial, there is a documentation, and there are all the links available for you to be using Jugalbandi. So please take advantage of this thing. Get from 0 to 1 very, very fast, because it will take you a little bit of work to go from 1 to 9. And what we want to do is like shorten up your runway. On that note, thank you so much for your patience, and this was Jugalbandi for you all.